Hey guys, it's Merlin here, and today I want to talk to you about something that has been bothering me for a while, and that is Spider-Man's character. Now, I kind of feel that Spider-Man has sort of gotten off on a bad track lately, really for about the past decade, but I realize that it's a problem that's been rooted in the character's development for a long time. If anybody's going to take offense to this video, just before I go on my little tangent here, just let me say one thing. As some of you guys might know, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. I really am. I enjoy the character. He is one of my favorite Marvel characters. When I was a kid, I think he was my favorite character, honestly. I mean, Batman kind of took that spot for a while, and sometimes it alternates, but Spider-Man's still up there for me, though I will admit I haven't read many of his comics lately. And I think that the biggest problem I have with Spider-Man's character is a simple one. And I understand that, once again, this is marketing kind of taking over and just saying, okay, what sells best, and that's sort of affecting the ability of some of these writers and artists and creators of the Marvel characters, particularly Spider-Man, to take chances. Now, a lot of other characters like the X-Men, the Hulk, the Avengers, have gone on some pretty ridiculous stories, and they have alternated from what people typically expect of them. Now, with Spider-Man, he kind of was growing. And the problem with Spider-Man's character is that it's a very simple issue. In the popular culture, Spider-Man fans, at least this is the concept that a lot of the people behind Spider-Man seem to think, people that engage in reading Spider-Man comics or watching his movies, whatever it may be, think of Spider-Man as a teenager. And because of that, they keep him basically as a teenager. Now, admittedly, the character got his start when he was a teenager, and I think it's okay to occasionally go back and look at those storylines. However, people don't allow Spider-Man to grow up. Now, that was one of the cool things about Ultimate Spider-Man for a long time until somewhat recently, is that it was able to go back and take a look at Spider-Man when he was a teenager, when he got his powers when he was 16, and kind of look at those high school situations and seeing Spider-Man as a teenager, as a young man, growing up and learning about power and responsibility, and kind of looking at those old storylines again, taking a new spin on them, rebooting them, making them a bit darker and grittier, and kind of focusing on a lot of big ideas about growing up and a lot of social commentary. And honestly, Ultimate Spider-Man is probably, at least was for a long time, one of the best written Spider-Man ongoing storylines and one of the best Marvel publications in general. It really was. The writing was so good for the character, which is fine. I don't mind Spider-Man being a teenager. Of course, it doesn't really matter anymore in that particular universe because Spider-Man's dead at the moment and a new character has taken his place, which I'm okay with, but it ultimately means we don't have the teenage Spider-Man anymore for people that want to get that particular aspect of the character explored. This brings us to another issue, and that is the treatment of Spider-Man in the ongoing Marvel Universe. Now, One More Day was a storyline that basically reset everything and took out Spider-Man's marriage to Mary Jane, because the people that were in charge of Marvel Comics at the time simply believed that people would be interested in Spider-Man if he got older, if he got married and focused on adult life. And I think this is completely idiotic. Because one of the cool things about these characters is people that have been reading these characters tend to follow them for a long time. Okay, people have been reading these characters, some of them, since the 1960s. I know some people still follow these characters for decades, and it's cool to see these characters grow. Now, obviously, you can't have them grow to a certain point because that's one of the magical elements of comic book characters, is that they are kind of suspended in time. So, you can have alternate universes where they do grow old and see possible futures, but to be completely honest, it's just not practical to have them completely age, because then it would become even less believable they could take on these supervillains and whatnot. But it is cool to see these characters grow to some degree from certain points in their history, see them kind of learn from their experiences. Now, admittedly, with different authors, sometimes these ideas are reset, but at least the overall tone is somewhat different. And like I said, you can have original reboots of Spider-Man as a kid, and it would be fine, but that can be an ongoing thing. In the original Marvel Universe, the original canon, Spider-Man was actually growing for a while. He graduated high school in the 60s. He graduated college in the 60s. And for most of his career, Spider-Man has been somewhere in his early 20s to his late 20s, early 30s, which I think is fine, because it allowed the character to explore different venues, take on different jobs, different life situations, face marriage, face relationship issues, who knows, maybe even parenthood to some extent. I think it would be a great opportunity to explore different facets of the character growing. And he was kind of growing. But the problem is, Spider-Man is basically supposed to be a teenager forever. He's supposed to embody teenage angst, and I guess that's one of the reasons why the character's been so popular. But I think that's one reason why we need him to have things like Ultimate Spider-Man, where he can have spin-offs focusing on those different aspects. The original storyline, though, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, was still acting like a teenage kid, afraid to face responsibility, just sitting and whining, going over these problems in his head, just afraid to deal with anything. Now, admittedly, we all get like that sometimes, but he was doing it like he was still a teenager, and this guy's supposed to be somebody who's 25 to 30 years old with full-on multiple jobs and a lot of responsibility. You'd think he would start learning from his mistakes and stop being a whiny little man. Unfortunately, this is just a typical character trait that the writers seem to come back to time and again. And I think that's one reason why some fans have kind of lost interest in the character, myself and some people I know, for instance. And I know that is the typical consensus for Spider-Man's character, unfortunately, but it just is the case. And unfortunately, in recent comics, they've sort of taken him back to his roots again. Now, thankfully, they've sort of recently undone the events of One More Day, but hopefully they will take more steps to see Spider-Man grow and at least act a little more like an adult. Because, honestly, I think if the outcry from One More Day was any indication, people liked Mary Jane and Peter Parker together. They liked them together as a couple. I never heard anybody complain that Spider-Man wasn't cool because he was an adult and he was married and had some restrictions. I mean, it makes the character more interesting and more believable. It's just the way it is. So that's just one issue that I've had with Spider-Man. Let me know what you guys think about it, because this is a problem, I think, with the character that really seems to plague him and not really many of the other Marvel characters. And let me know what you guys think about it, because I'd really love to hear your opinions on Spider-Man, his character, him as a teenager, him as an adult, the different directions they've taken him. Just let me know what you guys think. Alright guys, Merlin out. Peace.